I didn't grow up wealthy, and I wasn't surrounded by people who had personal wealth. When you don't have that, there's an assumption that the people who have wealth feel safe and feel abundant in the world.
Cute.
Not true, as it turns out. Some of the people with the most amount of money feel the least safe and have the most scarcity often. I think we realize that there's a perception probably out in the world that we have all the resources we need to manifest this beautiful dream, this vision of building this place. And so this is kind of a milestone moment because we're sort of like pulling back the curtains and saying, actually, there's a whole other side to the story. Welcome to the Integrated Intelligence Podcast. I'm your host, Azria Becker. The exponential modernization of our world has led to a widespread belief system that success is the byproduct of intellect. I think, therefore I am. But many of us are no longer buying into this limited definition of what it means to be human. The curious amongst us have instead been called to explore our original AI, ancient intelligence, and the many intelligence systems that make up our reality. Intuitive, somatic, collaborative, environmental, and so many more. Join us as we speak to leading authors, innovators, and culture creators dedicated to reconnecting humanity to the essential aliveness that goes far beyond the thinking mind. Hello, and welcome to the Integrated Intelligence Podcast.
It's always a little nerve-wracking when your wife has a camera on you and gets to ask you any questions she wants.
Any question. You cannot say no.
Right? I know the editor, though, so.
Yes, you have final cut. I'm not just your wife.
Yeah, co-founder, boss.
Partner, oracle. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited for this conversation. I'm excited to dive in. Really high level, we're going to be covering some pretty, I would say, juicy topics. Really our journey from independence to interdependence, our journey from having a vision and a dream that was massive, that many people told us was impossible, to actually stepping into the realization of that vision and that dream, and then crossing the massive chasm, the gap between the dream and the reality.
God, I think about how naive we were when we started that.
Oh my God.
Yeah, nobody could tell us no.
No one could talk us out of it.
Yeah, and then we had a lot of moments where we were like, should we just quit?
Yes, but we haven't quit and we're not quitting.
No.
And so for those that don't know, I'll just briefly share. KAVANÂ is a 30-acre retreat center and learning institute on the Pacific coast of Mexico. And our mission is really to accelerate personal transformation that ignites ripples of impact. So our main focus really with the Institute is collaborative research, bringing thought leaders together, indigenous wisdom keepers, having deep conversations, and then sharing that with the world so that that information can spread. Transformational processes, which includes our signature programs, retreats, the deep work, and then experiential trainings as well. So training people to hold space, to be facilitators, to stand in the world as purpose-driven leaders. So I guess the short of it is KAVANÂ is really a place and a path to finding meaning. And I believe that's maybe one of the core pain points in our current culture, is that we are collectively in a meaning crisis. So how do we find that? Well, we have to go within. We have to start here and then let that ripple out.
Yeah, and for me, that meaning crisis really hit hard. When I got to the top of that, proverbial first mountain of traditional success, had the cars, the planes, the boats, this vacation home. I really felt empty inside. It was like I'd worked so hard to get to a certain place and then found it unfulfilling. And so really, it's been a journey of redefining what success is. And I think as a collective, that's something that we get to do.
Yeah, I think redefining success is something that we are extremely passionate about at KAVANÂ. And a huge part of our mission ultimately is that. And, we'll share more about kind of the way that expresses itself. But collectively, I think the traditional idea of success is breaking down and it's being composted into something new. And I know for me, my idea of success was being a famous actress. And then I went on a journey of finding my deeper purpose, which led me to finding you. So when we first met, 2019, I was 33 years old. And I was in a journey of declaring to the universe that I was ready and willing to steward millions of dollars on behalf of my mission, which is really not my mission, but a collective mission to create a more beautiful world and to address some of the systemic challenges that we are facing collectively as a species, whether they be social, environmental, financial, political, spiritual, emotional. We got a lot of them, right? There's a fair amount of havoc that is wreaking on the planet right now. And then you showed up.
You're welcome.
Thank you, sir. And in one fell swoop, you came in and said, let's do this together. But your journey of stepping into this as the fearless funder, you weren't always fearless, right? No, there was a tremendous amount of fear wrapped up in your financial reality. And I think a lot of times, I know for me as someone who never grew up, I didn't grow up wealthy, even remotely. And I wasn't surrounded by people who had personal wealth. So when you don't have that, there's an assumption that the people who have wealth feel safe and feel abundant in the world.
Yeah, cute.
Not true, as it turns out. In fact, some of the people with the most amount of money feel the least safe and have the most scarcity often. And you were a part of that club. For sure. In a big way. So I guess maybe just to frame this conversation, and then I'll stop talking and let you talk. I think we realize that there's a perception probably out in the world from our community, the people that have been following us on this journey, that we have all the resources we need to manifest this beautiful dream, this vision of building this place. And so this is kind of a milestone moment because we're sort of like pulling back the curtains and saying, actually, there's a whole other side to the story that we would like to share with you today. I believe money can be, not always, but can be such a powerful teacher because it forces us to confront all of these deep-seated primal survival fears. Like there is nothing that can trigger our survival fears as much as money can, or the lack of money. And so maybe just share a little bit about, how you were raised.
Yeah, I guess to start at the beginning, my entrepreneurial endeavors or life started with this business that my father and our family started together. We started Hispanic grocery stores, and we found this old rundown building that used to be a old market basket, so a grocery store back in the 50s. And when we found it, it had like pigeons flying around in it. It was really run down. And we converted into a supermarket. And when I say we actually, were digging trenches and, in the ditches, figuring out the plumbing. And
you worked in construction for a while as well, right?
Well, I worked in constructions during the summers of college, in a light way.
Yeah.
And then from there we started growing the business and, grew it over a 12-year period to 1,800 employees and a couple $100 million in annual revenue. And through that business, it was really multiple businesses round into one. So I learned so much. It was a distribution business. We had scratch bakeries and kitchens. And so I learned manufacturing and food and finance. We owned a lot of real estate through that business and retail shopping centers. And so I learned about that.
You learned about management too. If you can share the story of the guy that started that couldn't use a calculator, that would be amazing.
Yeah, we had very interesting, we had to be scrappy. And so, one of at one point, a few months into the business, the guy responsible for the meat division, came up and said his brother needed a kidney and he was going to go donate. And he left from one day to the next. And so from one day to the next, I became the meat buyer. And, I was lucky enough to even know what ground beef was made of. But we hired people to fill those roles and it never quite worked out. And finally, I just got sick of it and decided to train somebody to support. And I found this kid that was really eager and hungry to learn and grow. And come to find out he didn't know how to use a calculator. And by the time he finished, he was running a $50 million division of our business.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and then, from there became a serial entrepreneur, started doing a lot of real estate, repurposing assets, retail shopping center stuff, and then invested in a series of other businesses. Most of the businesses I invested in were I didn't plan it this way, but it worked out where I invested with people that I had intimate relationships with. So, YPO and Vistage, Foreign Brothers and Sisters, and so music label, a couple tech companies, and things like that. And in 2016, my father died, and he was my best friend. He was only 24 years older than me, and it really shook my world. Fairly unexpected. He got pancreatic cancer, and 10 months later, he's dead. And I declared that I was going to start doing something that mattered, because I realized so much of what I was doing didn't really make a difference and didn't matter. And I felt like I needed to do that. There was a deep burning inside of me to do that. And I ended up going the other direction. Cannabis industry started taking off in California. I started investing, significant amount of money, and ended up in a massive lawsuit.
And you didn't invest in cannabis because you were passionate about cannabis as a medicine. You saw the profit margins and you thought, holy shit.
In my head, I rationalized it in this way of, well, I'll just make an X amount millions more, and then I'll be able to do more good later. And I ended up in this massive lawsuit and put, my family at risk, and put myself in fetal position. And I came out of that. I went through a pretty dark night of the soul, didn't like what I looked in the mirror, what I saw in the mirror. And I decided I needed to create a system because I didn't trust myself. So I created this operating system to guide my life that if I followed, I wouldn't get off track again. And shortly after that, I met you and realized that your passions and your vision was so exciting to me, and that our unique and very different skill set together would be really powerful. And we fell madly in love. And within a month from meeting each other, we were looking for land. And 4 months later, we were buying a property and hosting retreats and doing the work. So it was a really exciting time. And I committed to the business in kind of phases. So initially we bought a house, which wasn't, high risk. Yeah. And so this place in LA was really a place we thought we'd live the rest of our lives. And then we went and started looking for land. And at first we were looking for a small 5 acres to build a very small, intimate retreat center. And then we found Musa and fell in love with this place. Musa is our neighboring property, and our partners, Tara and Andres, who we also fell in love with. And the place is magical. You can walk up the beach for an hour and not see a human. There's thousands of birds. It's kind of incredible. It's a 3.5-hour flight from LA and a 45-minute drive. And we fell in love, and the vision kept expanding. And then we've now expanded our partnership with Tara and Andres and Musa. And we're doing like a town of the future, impact-oriented town of the future. And it's so exciting. And it's also requiring us to go all in. So we're selling our home. We're forced to put every penny we have into this and all of our time and energy. And we're so blessed and privileged to even be holding this vision. And then we started hiring people and spending money. And, the fear side of me was always kicking in of like, oh my God, we have to have revenue and we have to figure this out. And so it sent me on a journey of really personal transformation and work. And it wasn't until my work with plant medicine that I was able to discover the root cause of why I had shown up the way I had, with so much fear, really, and anxiety in my life around money and resources. And so I went to Peru and did what's called a dieta. I spent 10 days in the jungle with a shaman, and had one of the most challenging experiences of my life, and one of the most beautiful experiences in hindsight, where I kind of regressed and I became childlike, and to the point where I was just, literally in fetal position, not even wanting to be alive. So through this experience, I was able to discover that there was a childhood trauma that I didn't relate to as a trauma. So you see, I was highly dyslexic and ADHD and couldn't really read. And so when I left my home and went out into the world, which was school at that time, I didn't feel safe. I mean, I remember, being horrified when a teacher would call on me to read out loud in a class. And so this lack of not feeling safe continued throughout my life at a subconscious level that I wasn't aware of. And so as I created more and more material wealth, I created more and more material wealth to feel safe, but it was a bottomless pit, a black hole, right? There's no amount of money that would have made me feel safe because I knew it was all a fluke, and if I lost it, I could never replace it because I was dumb. And so this experience in Peru that allowed me to excavate and harvest this childhood trauma and allowed me to process it in a way was the thing that finally let me kind of go from this energy of hoarding to like opening and finally being willing to share my blessings with the world. And so that's been quite the journey for me to go on.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned the operating system, this really comprehensive tool that you built that now is a huge part of our methodology and something that we share in our transformational processes and programs that we offer. And I remember the first time you showed it to me. I don't know if you remember this. We were sitting in your living room in Venice. This was maybe, I don't know, 10 days after we met or something, like maybe less. We moved pretty fast. Yeah. And you were like, I built this thing. It's like 200 pages. It's got everything anyone would ever want to know about me and more in it, including my entire financial situation, the money that I owe, the money I'm owed, the lawsuits, the potentialities, the forecasts of what might happen if things go my way or if things don't go my way. It was extremely vulnerable and pretty radical of you to like show this to, a woman that you were dating, that you were like just getting to know. And to me, it was like a turn on because I was like, I'm turned on by vulnerability and transparency more than anything else. I was like, wow, this is incredible, to just like not pretend, not hide, not wear any masks. And because you were so transparent from the very beginning, really, since we met, we've always known that there could be a moment in the future where we wouldn't have the capital we need to actually fully realize the vision that we were stewarding. There was a timeline, there was a few different timelines, possibilities where like if everything goes well and certain, very high risk investments like turn out the way we'd like them to, then maybe we can pull it off. And also there's the reality in which that doesn't happen, right? And we actually need to generate money in other ways. And I feel like that was this looming thing that was there kind of as like an undercurrent over this last 5-year period, where as we've been sort of stepping into the building of this thing and, you continually month by month, year by year, just like going more and more all in, right? And the more you were doing your personal work and looking at these deeper patterns, childhood traumas and belief systems around, not being worthy or not being smart or not being capable, as you were like processing that and integrating that, there was always more and more willingness to give more and to pour more in. And I'd love to sit here and tell the story of how the universe, orchestrated everything so that we would get exactly what we needed and we have all the resources that we could possibly want. Because, law of attraction, like you put it on the vision board and then there it is, right?
It just shows up.
It just shows up.
Magic.
Except that didn't happen. In fact, in some ways, the opposite happened. A lot of the things that could have gone sideways financially did go sideways. And there were some very unexpected financial hits that we took also, where it was like, oh, dang, that thing really didn't go our way at all. That lost us millions instead of making us millions. And so it's been interesting to be in that journey, especially as people who believe that, life is intelligent and that the energy we put out is reflected back at us.
Yeah. So the last few years have had some pretty massive curveballs. There's a few business ventures that didn't go to plan. And, I'm now in recovery of millions of dollars that are owed to me. And some other things just took longer than anticipated. And so the timing of things has really impacted us. And we're in that dance with life.
yeah, when you think there's millions, 10 plus millions of dollars coming your way, you make decisions, right, based on those assumptions. And then when those don't happen, you're like, oh, wow, okay, we're going to have to really rethink certain things. One of those examples is the remodel that we did here in Malibu. We have a beautiful space here, a sanctuary space that has been both a home and a sort of retreat center location, the beta version of a retreat center. We bought this place to host community events and bring people together and really start the program's work that we were developing. And when we bought this place, we knew from the very beginning, from the moment we did the inspection, that there was water penetration and pretty significant water damage, and that there was going to be renovations needed. There was literally, the windows were rotting out in certain parts of the house. And so you and I both have a tendency to be perfectionists and want things to be absolutely beautiful and the best they can be. And so the remodel kind of spiraled out of control a little bit, but we also assumed that this was going to be, our sort of location really in Los Angeles to represent our mission, in addition to Mexico. And LA has always felt like a really important portal for the world. If you think about it, so much of the cultural programming that comes out of this place, affects the minds and hearts of billions of human beings all across the world. And I've always known that part of the blueprint of true transformation is opening the hearts and minds of the people who are actually making the decisions, especially in media and storytelling and filmmaking. What is actually the message that we're programming the masses with? I could go on a whole rant around, all the, call it separation consciousness that is present in our media and all the fear that is being injected into us through story. I won't do that because that's a separate conversation. But yeah, the importance of having a physical space in LA, has never not felt true. So we went all in on this remodel to the point where we moved out of the house in 2022 and moved into a 200 square foot Airstream that we put on the grass below our property, and lived in that 200 square foot Airstream for 2.5 years. We never thought it was going to be quite that long, but we lived through the rainiest 2 winters that Los Angeles has seen since, I think, the 1960s or something like that. Our shower was outside. Our bathrooms were outside.
Yeah, we had more than one shower in the rain, freezing rain. It took courage to go take a shower.
I was like, I'm not showering. I will be a dirty hippie while you go shower. And, I'm really proud of us. I feel that we really, those were not easy years. But we thrived, we had everything we needed. And I think the beauty of that Airstream chapter was it reconnected us to the simple lifestyle, the minimalist lifestyle. We each had a drawer. You had a suitcase in the back of your trunk.
Yeah.
That was basically your closet.
Yeah, my suitcase lived open in the back of the Rover for a couple of years.
Yeah. And so, we took out loans to see this remodel through. The thing about remodels, as I've learned, I've never remodeled a house before, is like, once you start, you can't stop.
And they always cost more and take longer.
Every single time. And of course, everyone tells you that in advance, and you're like, no, ours won't do that. But that happened. So there was a moment where we realized, okay, we're actually not going to be able to do both. We're not going to be able to keep our place here and do Mexico with the resources that we currently personally have. That was quite the realization.
Yeah, I think the other thing that happened at the same time was our vision in Mexico kept growing.
Yeah.
So it was a double whammy.
Yeah.
We are where we are, and I think we're committed to seeing the vision to fruition.
So it's forced us into this deeper question of like, why is life withholding the thing that we feel that we need in order to manifest and realize this vision? So I want to bring this concept of the wisdom of lack, which is something that has come through and is also part of our curriculum and part of our methodology. So share with me your journey of stepping into understanding what that means?
Yeah, I think I've always intellectually understood a lot of the personal development work, but some of it, in life, you just can't really get until you live it. And so, unfortunately, I'm stubborn and sometimes have to learn things the hard way. Yeah, so Wayne Dyer has this quote that I really love, that life gives you an exam and it gives it to you over and over again until you pass it. And, some of us can be thick-headed and take a few times to learn things. So at this stage in my life, I'm really paying attention to those and trying to learn them the first time. But this last year, in many respects, has been one of the hardest because, well, for the last 5 years that we've been together, I've been kind of pulling rabbits out of the hat and, selling assets or borrowing or doing what I had to do to kind of keep things floating. But it's been coming to like, I'm running out of rabbits in the hat, right, to pull. And so the universe and I co-created this experience for me to learn and grow into a more embodied person, because although I understand a lot of these concepts intellectually, some of them I realized I wasn't embodied in, right? And so...
What do you mean by these concepts?
Well, I guess I'll refer specifically to this concept of the wisdom of lack, right? And so it's this concept that sometimes not getting the thing you think you want is actually a gift wrapped in thorns, and not getting, the loan or the saving, Hail Mary from somewhere to save the day has been a real gift, because it allowed me to get embodied in this deeper knowing and trust that the amount of money in my bank account doesn't determine how fulfilled I am or my success or prosperity. Like, you can be a prosperous person and not have a lot of money in your bank account. And so it allowed me to viscerally feel that. And I think that a lot of times in life, when you proclaim to the universe, at least this is what I believe, that you want to step into, let's say, a higher expression of yourself, what's the universe going to do to support you in that? It's going to give you obstacles and challenges so you can grow into the person that can actually do that thing, right? I'm going to go do this thing that I know is a stretch for me. And what we're building is a stretch for me, right? It requires a version of me that I'm yet to fulfill, or let me rephrase that. I'm yet to be the person that can fill those shoes, to hold everything that we're building. And so what's the universe going to do? The universe is going to give me challenges and obstacles so that I can grow into that person. And so it gave me what is one of the, at least on the financial side, one of the hardest challenges of my life. And it's really surreal to just be where I'm at internally. So it's been quite the journey. I've not been someone that's good at asking for help. And, as I've shared with you, I reached out to a few friends recently to ask to help to bridge this gap. And it took me a month to pick up the phone and ask for help. It's been a challenging journey, and I've really changed my perspective on it. And at this point, I look at it as an opportunity, an invitation for somebody to be part of, bringing something that's going to have a massive impact in the world to life. Mm-hmm. And so, to be on this podcast and going from like, I can't pick up the phone to call a good friend and ask for, a short-term bridge loan, to I'm telling the world where we're at and calling in our allies is been quite the journey for me. Yeah. And where we are today is, in a beautiful, beautiful place. We've spent the last 5 years and more aggressively the last 2.5 years. We've designed a beautiful retreat center. We have our permits in hand. Our construction team is like just raring to go. We've built a beautiful team at KAVANÂ, of facilitators and support. And I think that's probably the thing I'm most proud about, is the humans that are on the team that are just devoted. I've in my entire career, I've never seen this level of devotion from the people. I mean, I wouldn't even call them employees. Like, we're just doing the thing together. And it's been such a beautiful journey. And it's so interesting to see how differently it is fulfilling in my life.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about, I was looking at the concept brief that we've been building, you know, over the last couple of years, the brief, basically the master document that brings everything to life for the physical space specifically. And that doesn't even include the software, right? All the work we've done on the methodology and the programs and the guiding principles and the culture. And I mean, we have been in the trenches of like building this thing from scratch.
Oh my God, it's felt like forever we've been talking about the thing and building the foundation. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh my God, when can we just stop talking about the thing and designing the thing and just do the thing?
Yeah. Yeah. But the foundation is solid, you know, and that's the beautiful thing. And I was looking at this like 350-page concept brief and marveling really at the detail of what has gone into that, you know. I mean, it's one thing to build a brand, right? And we switched from becoming to KAVANÂ. We basically built an entire new brand identity and all the tiny details of that, and how does the brand feel and communicate and look, and how does it speak? Like, what are the voice pillars? What are the ways in which we communicate our message with the world? The do's,
God.
the don'ts.
I think we'd redid our values and principles like 200 times.
Probably, yeah.
Oh my God.
And then all the user research that we did. I mean, you know, and this is for those of you listening that are maybe know what I'm talking about because you're building your own business, or maybe you're wanting to build your business. You have a big vision. I had no idea the process of going out into the world and getting feedback and, you know, like interviewing facilitators. Like, we're building this retreat center, which we've never done before. Well, go out into the world, you know, ask people who are doing this and have been doing this, well, what are the specifics of what they would want in a space? And I feel like we made some difficult choices again and again, choices that ultimately cost us money, but that were the right choices for, you know, for the project. For example, we were going to originally sell residential lots on our property because we have a lot of land, and that would have subsidized, if not funded, the entire construction of the retreat center. And that would have made a lot of sense from a financial perspective. But if you actually think about the nature of the work that we're doing there on site, and people are in a deep process, and maybe there's a grief retreat and there's deep emotion moving, you can't have homeowners there with their families celebrating their kid's birthday at the restaurant at the same time as a group is going through a deep process, right? So through the research and the feedback and all of those thousands of hours, we really, I think, have gotten to a place where what we've designed is pretty meticulous, and the level of detail has been humbling, I'll say. And, you know, as you mentioned, like, we never dreamed that it would get this significant. You know, I think the idea of even building an institute, and what does that mean, right? To build an institute, to create a space for convergences and for thought leadership, to really stand in the world as a pillar of a transformational space, in the same way that Esalen did in the 60s as the home and the origin of the human potential movement. Like, that's been a big inspiration for us. I don't think either of us had any clue how much upfront energy and life force and capital was going to be needed to do that well. You know, we've invested many millions of dollars just to get us here to this moment where we're actually ready to, with permits in hand, like, start construction.
Yeah, I guess it's a good thing that startup founders don't often know what it's going to take, because if they did, I don't know that we would do it all over again.
Yeah.
Because it's been such an exorbitant amount of effort.
Well, you're also a father to human children, and you said that there's this like biological amnesia that happens where you actually like literally forget how hard it is to have a baby, so that you'll do it again.
Oh, that's true. There's
And
a
then,
psychological thing there.
Yeah, and with startup business, the same thing. Like, you didn't think you were building a startup again halfway through your life. You kind of been there, done that, but here you are again, putting in the 80-hour work weeks.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know what's wrong with me.
I think you just might be inspired. Yeah. Well, the wisdom of lack, I think for me, as you know, if I had to distill the wisdom into a very simple way of sort of sharing, you know, where we started, where we are, it's really the journey from independence to interdependence, which is also, I think, a collective journey that we need to go on, right? Right now, we live in a culture that is focused on the individual succeeding, the individual self-actualizing, right? If you look at the wealth inequality, right? The smallest percent of humans have the most amount of capital and resources on this planet. And that divide is growing and growing and growing. And it's coming from a culture of hyper independence, hyper individualism. And David Brooks talks about this in The Second Mountain. And it's funny because we named our place in Malibu The Second Mountain, and we deeply resonate with these terms. But at the same time, there was a blind spot because we were also still operating from a place of independence. We were like, we're self-funded. We don't need anyone else to do this with us. We don't need anyone else to believe in our vision. You know, there's a power in that, and also a protection in that, right? Because opening yourself to receive, especially financially, is vulnerable and intimate. And it's also a recognition that we can't do it on our own. Like we took it as far as we could, and now we can't take it beyond that. Like now we get to invite those humans that are inspired by this vision and want to be a part of it to step forward and contribute in whatever way is aligned for them. And we're creating pathways for that, you know, openings for that for the first time. So the wisdom of lack, I think, is like really recognizing the shadow of independence. It's, of course, we all need to go through a stage of independence. We all need to individuate and become independent humans. But we can't stay there. Like we must evolve beyond independence into interdependence, where we recognize that we're interdependent, not just with other humans, but with all of life, all the ecosystems that surround us and all the elements that keep us alive. You know, we are interdependent beings. And that forgetting of that is what's led to so much of the systemic challenge that we face today.
Yeah, for sure. And I would say that it also requires you to feel worthy of support, which for many of us is a challenge sometimes, right? And so it's quite the journey. It's an inner job, right?
Yeah. Well, I think there's the worthiness piece. I think also there's the control piece, right? Because when you're self-funded, you have the power, you have the control, you can decide what you build and how fast you build it. And, you know, you're fully in the seat of making those decisions. And when you welcome in a capital and other people's energy, it becomes more of a collaborative thing. But at the end of the day, KAVANÂ is about collaboration, right? And we've been moving away at the same time. We've been moving away from being kind of more of a personal brand, what people would call a personal brand, to an organizational voice that is representing many diverse perspectives and opinions and backgrounds. And that's what we want KAVANÂ to be. We want it to be this incredible incubator for all these different visionaries and luminaries and thought leaders and pioneers of a more beautiful world to come together and support each other, and then go out in the world and build all the various different projects that are ultimately going to become the foundation of whatever the new paradigm is. So just to recap, you know, wisdom of lack is going to show up differently for every person. And if you're listening to this, you know, maybe you have your own expression of that. Maybe the wisdom of lack for you isn't financial. Maybe it's in the relationship. Maybe that romantic partner you've been calling in hasn't shown up yet. And you're like, why? I'm doing all the things, you know? And maybe the reason that life is withholding that from showing up is because there's something that needs to be excavated that would never be excavated if that person was already here. In the same way that for us, there's patterns and ways of operating, blind spots that we were forced to confront, which was, by the way, very uncomfortable, that we would have never been able to see or access if we didn't have our back up against the wall. And life wasn't like, here's your initiation. Like, no, all these financial things you thought were going to work out are actually not going to work out, because your bigger intention, your bigger prayer is to become the most embodied and aligned expression of who you came here to be.
I had some moments when, in my darkest moments in the last 6 months, I remember a day where I was like, literally, I couldn't sleep. We were in Mexico and I had nowhere to go, and I was just exhausted, but I couldn't sleep. And I just started crying, and I was like, universe, I really don't want to be all those things I said I did. Can you please just make my life easy? I'll live a simple life. I don't want any of that, so my curriculum can be much lower. I don't need to learn all those lessons to be this higher expression. I'm good. But I really, for sure. And
I want to double click on that a bit, because the epidemic of stress and burnout is real, right? You're not the only person who's experiencing this right now. And I think it's interesting because we associate that often with like the entrepreneurial journey and the founder journey. Like, you're building something, it's a startup, it's a thing, it's hard. Like you're not going to sleep and you're going to work yourself to death. And there's a celebration in that too, in our culture of like, the harder you work, the more worthy you are. That sort of grind culture energy. And the reality of it is not glamorous at all, right? Like me as your wife, watching you deal with some of the most extreme insomnia, like not being able to sleep no matter how exhausted you were, feeling like your memory was literally like failing you, like you couldn't even remember things because you were so completely depleted. I was deeply worried about you for months. And in that, there was also, a deep excavation of like, okay, well, what's really going on? I mean, here's a man who's gone to Peru multiple times, who's done all the transformational modalities you could possibly think of. It's not like you haven't been doing the work. So why are you in this place? What's underneath? What's that extra layer that we haven't been able to excavate yet? And so I think maybe sharing a little bit about some of the inherited belief systems really around hard work and struggle that you've been facing off with.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly learned a lot of these patterns from my father, of believing that it all has to be hard and that you have to worry and stress about, I can't tell you how many times he told me at times in our first business where he's like, you don't know what it feels like for the bank to call you and say, where's my money? And you don't have it. And, have this threat that they're going to take your business from you. And you don't want this feeling. You don't want this feeling when they call and knock on your door. He would tell me all the time. And so it was ingrained in me. And, and it is certainly systemic in our society. I will say that, a startup and launching your own business is, under any circumstances, is something that requires an exorbitant amount of effort. I think where I was, struggling was in how I was holding it. And so two people in the exact same circumstances, one person could be calm as a cucumber and the other person could be, freaking out. And I intellectually knew that as I was going through it, I knew that it was just how I was holding it. My theme for the year, when I started the year, I do a theme for each year of, a few words to describe my intention for the year. And my theme for the year was to hold it with ease and grace. And I failed miserably for the first, 6 months of the year, like miserably. Couldn't have gone more in the other direction. And it's this wisdom of lack concept. It's not getting the thing I said I wanted is what gave me the opportunity and the challenge to move through it.
And now we're gonna throw another wrench in the mix because it's actually on some level, on an unconscious level, you got exactly what you wanted, which is the existential kink of it all, right? And this is super juicy because I love this part of the rabbit hole of the inner world. So existential kink, for those of you that don't know it, it's a book, and it's basically a concept that the very things we say we don't want at some deeper subconscious level are the very things that we are totally turned on by. And so the only way to free ourselves from these negative or destructive patterns is to like own and bask in the turn on of that thing. And it's hard to do because these are literally the things that we have rejected and abandoned the most within ourselves. So if you were to,
fucked up concept.
It's so fucked up because it's actually so true.
Yeah.
And so if you now look at it through this theme of, this is such a fundamental trait of what I would call the uninitiated masculine in our culture, which is being the protector and the provider to the point of self-destruction, being the one that needs to fix it, being the problem solver. Like there was, I think, a deep recognition that there's also a kink for you in that.
For sure. I've always, historically, I've always been able to figure it out and save the day. And, maybe at a subconscious level, I was putting myself in a situation where saving the day was just getting harder and harder until I couldn't. And I see the fallacy in it all. Yeah, I see it, and it's also one of those things that sometimes you just have to experience, it to go actually move through it, right? So life gives you the opportunity to bring those feelings all to the surface through an actual experience, so you can actually transmute them. And so for me, it was running out of money was my worst fear, and I got there and lived through it, and then now I'm on the other side of it, and I still have no money, and yeah, and I'm calm as a cucumber. And so
And just to clarify, it's not that there's no money, there's no liquidity, right? We do have a house that we have on the market that we are selling. The money that comes out of that, which is not all that much, even though it might seem like it's a lot, is going 100% to the build of KAVANÂ. And we'll cover, phase 1A. Originally, we're hoping it would cover phase 1, but it's not going to be enough for that. So it's going to phase 1A, which is a more humble version of phase 1, but enough to get going. But the wisdom of lack of the house not selling is, it's really forced us to take a beat and to really reevaluate. And, the house was supposed to sell 6 months ago. It was supposed to be listed even before that. It's been delayed. Here we are. We're still in the house. And so we had timed it in a way where we were like certain that we would have, the money by now, and we don't. And so what does that mean? Well, one of our values is, savoring the beauty of what is. So what is we get to fundraise. We get to invite others to be a part of this and welcome new energy in. And so, yeah, the journey from, I would say, another trait of, the uninitiated masculine, or what we call alpha, where we use alpha and omega to sort of replace the words masculine, feminine, is along with the, I need to be the one to fix and solve. I need to be the one to protect and provide. There's often a deep resistance to actually receiving, right? Which is more of an omega trait. So another thing that I've seen happen is as you've been forced into the surrender, you've also integrated your omega a lot more, which allows you to be more in the receiving and the opening and the softening to life. So can you share a little bit about that journey for you, for those listening?
So how's Omega kind of manifested in my life? So I guess, traditionally in, say, my previous businesses, it was very much like, what's the return? How am I going to make more money? What's the transactional side of it, which is maybe more the alpha side of it. And the omega side of it really is maybe more of the why. And so this business that we have now, KAVANÂ, is radically different than any other business. Not even because it's a different product, you could say, but because the intention is so radically different. And so I think we've just put the impact at the forefront of everything we're doing, and the why at the front and center, and the economics of it all kind of come secondary. So the decision to be a nonprofit has been a difficult one, and one we've been, going round and round with the attorneys and lawyers. And it's one of those decisions that once you make it, you can't go backwards. But it's felt so true in our hearts. And I think the reason it is, there's nothing wrong with being a for-profit. In fact, we need more for-profit, purposeful organizations in the world. And but the reason we feel so strongly that KAVANÂ wants to be a nonprofit is because the vision is so much bigger than us and what we're doing. And so it feels like the type of organization that wants to steward hundreds of millions of dollars and bring other people's energy, both passions and inspirations and money, into this organization. And so we see ourselves as stewards of it and always have. It's not ours. We're just the seeds and the co-founders of it. But it's going to be so much bigger than us.
Yeah, and maybe just to double click on that a little bit, there's a huge opportunity for social impact and environmental impact that I can see coming out of KAVANÂ. And we've been talking a lot about what that looks like for us. There's kind of the obvious, which is like making the transformational work more accessible to people, and not just in the physical space, but also the online component. We have a whole digital side of our organization that right now is dormant as we focus on the physical space. But, that's something that can reach people no matter where they are in the world. And we want to disseminate these tools really for people to become, regulated, empowered humans that are standing in their truth and are able to own and claim their truth and follow their highest excitement and their purpose and come out of scarcity. And, all the things that we bring, we want to make that information as accessible to as many people as possible. When you're for profit, you have a business model, you have to sell things to people to generate revenue, and there's a limit to that. When you're nonprofit, I think there's an opportunity for people to get behind this with financial contributions that can just cast a much wider net ultimately.
Yeah,
and
I want to highlight that even though we're a nonprofit, the business model is very profitable.
Yeah.
It's a regenerative business, right? So it's not.
The business needs to be completely, it needs to stand on its own. It can't be dependent on other people writing us charitable checks or giving us grants. So that's very clear. But again, thinking beyond that, right? Thinking beyond how does this become just a cash flowing business? But really thinking about the ripples of impact that can expand. Also, if you think about the local impact that we'll be having, also with our partners Musa and the impact initiatives there, whether it's cleaning up the saltwater lagoon that's behind our property, social impact stewards that are already on the ground doing amazing work. Like we just did a mini documentary film about this marine biologist who's teaching all the local captains in the area how to have more empathy for the whales, for example. So how can we support her? And she's already doing amazing work. I'm sure she has challenges. I'm sure she has pain points. How can the tools that we bring in the frameworks around leadership, support her to be even more effective in her mission? And so these are the kinds of things that we are really excited to have the capacity to share. Because at the end of the day, this has never been about making money for us. It's always been about how many lives can we touch? And money is a part of that. And money is a sacred and important part of that.
Yeah, and maybe you could talk a little bit about Make Dope Art and how that is also kind of an expression of this omega and allows the receiving part of it to come in.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I posted the other day, the future isn't female, it's integrated. There's been this like the future is female sort of thing going around, people wearing the shirts. And I'm all about female empowerment, believe me. But I've always had contraction around that because it's felt lopsided.
Yeah, the pendulum just swinging the other way.
Like, yes, this, patriarchal culture we're in needs to evolve. Yes, uninitiated masculine is like, certainly not the path. And going so far into omega is that we lose the plot, right? So the future to me has to be integrated. So when we integrate these polarities within ourselves and we operate from a place of integration, not making them the same, honoring them for their differences, but having the energetic agility to be able to move between the poles depending on what's needed, we show up differently and it affects everything. And so that can sound very sort of theoretical or conceptual, but a more tangible framework that's come out of that I would say is more of like an integrated approach that really integrates omega as well into, creating something, is the Make Dope Art framework, which I was playing around with before I even met you. And it's shown up again and again. So Make Dope Art, first of all, dope, it stands for daring, original, purposeful expression. And by art, I mean anything from an actual, piece of art to music to a business to even like the way that you live your life, your family, your home can be art. And so the 3 steps are make dope art, let them come to you, and ask for what you want. And the let them come to you is that omega. Omega creates through magnetism. Omega draws in the same way the womb draws the sperm in, right, to make life. Well, that's the same principle. And so we're in our culture, because we're so conditioned to operate from this highly analytical, intellectual, and really alpha-oriented state of just like, okay, I want to create something. What's the linear plan, right? Chronologically, what are the steps I have to take? The faster I take those steps, the more work I'm willing to put in, the faster I get the result. This goal-oriented way of operating, which is great, we need that, but also it's not the only way. So the omega side of the equation is like the letting it come to you, tuning yourself from the inside out, like the frequency that you're emitting in your thoughts, in your emotions, in your body, like letting things also be drawn into your sphere, is coming from this more integrated approach. Now, asking for what you want, you could say, is more of an alpha. It's like, okay, I'm going to claim it. I'm going to declare it, and I'm just going to open the door and let those that are wanting to walk through it walk through.
Very directive, yeah.
Very directive, right? So alpha is kind of like the aligned action in its unlocked expression. There's also the locked expression of alpha, which is more of what we were talking about earlier, sort of the more toxic traits. And then omega is like the somatic surrender. And by somatic, it's like it can't just be an intellectual surrender. To your point earlier, like you understood all these things intellectually, but you weren't physically embodying them, meaning your nervous system, your head was like, I trust the universe. And your nervous system was like, I do not trust the universe. Like, I am terrified that everything's going to fall apart. So there's a disconnect. And so to truly come into an embodied experience of integration, we have to go through that ability to somatically surrender. And there's no way to somatically surrender if the heart and the mind and the belief systems and all the other layers of us all those other intelligence systems are also aligned with that surrender. So the body is kind of the final frontier, because the body is the densest part of us. Literally, it's matter, right? Whereas like our spirit and our thoughts and our beliefs are all more malleable. They're more energetic. Our physiology needs time, and it needs things that the other parts of us don't need. So if I were to sort of reflect back what I saw in your journey of going from like the sky is falling, everything's over, worst case is happening. I saw you reach a somatic surrender that you never been forced to reach before. And I don't think you could have reached it under any other circumstances. Like, things had to get so extreme to where there was no choice but to reach it. And in those moments of like, I have no more tools, I have no more rabbits in the hat, you turned to ritual, really, which we've been doing these traditional tea ceremonies every morning, where we're pouring tea and we're sitting in silence and we're, setting our intentions for the day and speaking our gratitudes aloud, and really like, in a way, very actively handing the reins over to the intelligence of life and saying like, we got nothing left.
Yeah, we're pulling tarot cards.
We're pulling tarot cards at 6 a.m. on a Wednesday. Like, like there's nothing left to do, but
take your hands off the steering wheel.
Yeah. And such a beautiful moment. And so in that, there's been so much magic. And also you started sleeping again, and you started feeling excited again, and you started trusting life at a much deeper level. And while you in some ways went more into your omega, I went more into my alpha, right? Where we kind of are like meeting in the middle. I was like, okay, it's time to take aligned action. It's time to, let's just be transparent about where we are. Let's film this podcast right now. There's someone out there that needs to hear this.
Yeah, it's been beautiful. The thing I said I didn't want was actually the gift wrapped in thorns, as I said earlier. And it's been quite the journey. Unfortunately, some of us have to learn lessons the hard way, and others don't. So hope I get a reprieve on lessons from the universe for a little while. Yeah, but we're in a beautiful place now, and opening our container, our organization to others, so that we can be more interdependent, right? Yeah. As you said earlier.
Because I believe that what KAVANÂ represents, it's not just a physical space. It's not just a place you can come and attend a retreat or, be part of a convergence or engage in collaborative research. It's really a blueprint. It's meant to be a blueprint or a template that hopefully inspires various other purpose-driven projects all over the world. And those are going to express themselves in their own unique way. But it's the blueprint of creating something from the very, very beginning from a place of integration, I guess, from a different operating system. And Therefore, because that's what it actually wants to be in its purest essence, we as the founders and the original stewards of it must go through the initiations to embody that, because if we didn't, we would just follow.
Why are we doing this again?
I don't know, babe. It's a great question. We could just go get McDonald's and watch Netflix.
You mean we can't just fake it?
Well, this is the problem, right?
Yeah.
You can't actually fake it. You have to actually live it.
Oh my God.
100% of you has to be aligned with it.
I just want to play the bongos and...
Yeah. So here we are, and it's a beautiful moment. And really this idea of stewardship, we use this word a lot, stewardship.
Our titles.
Yeah, we are both the co-founding stewards. Every single person on our team has steward in their title. And why do we do that? Well, because there's a fundamental difference between owning something and stewarding something, right? When you're stewarding something, you're sort of acknowledging that it has its own intelligence and its own design and its own sovereignty. And you are here to give it the best conditions possible to have its own expression, which might include at some point you actually stepping away from it, right? I would say parenthood is probably ideally stewardship.
Yeah.
It's not usually how we relate to it, but and so with this vision, it's kind of like it's initiating us, right? Like it's forcing us to let go of control and listen at the deepest level to the intelligence of what's actually coming through, versus constantly projecting our idea of what it should be onto it. And it's making demands of us. For example, this move from independence to interdependence being one of the many things that it's demanded of us. Like putting ego aside, putting the need for control aside, like all these things, right? And I guess stewardship also, and where I want KAVANÂ, I hope KAVANÂ will be an invitation for those listening and anyone that comes across this, that is a visionary, or not even a visionary, but just someone that feels the call to like contribute to a more beautiful world for the future generations. Like, what does stewardship look like in your life, And because we're talking about money, I think financial stewardship is a big part of this. Like, we will not build a more beautiful world, to use Charles Eisenstein's language, without large amounts of money. Hundreds of millions, trillions of dollars will need to flow into the building of new purpose-driven projects, businesses, organizations, ventures, structures, systems. And so how do we, as people who are not actually motivated by money, right? We're not doing this for the money. This is not about profit to us. But how do we embrace prosperity, also financial prosperity, at the highest level so that we can then steward it, right, into the people and the places that need it most? And so for me, there was a time in my life, most of my life, where the idea of $10,000 was like a lot of money. And then it kind of kept growing as I kept expanding my capacity. And it was like, okay, now $100,000 seems like a lot of money. And then it was like, oh my God, dare I believe I could steward $1 million, And now it's like we blink and we've invested $1 million into our thing. We're like, okay, well, there goes another million, And it's all relative at the end of the day. But I really want to invite, especially those of us who are empathic and sensitive and care about the world, to like claim that financial stewardship. And I'm claiming it. I want to steward a minimum of $100 million into this new earth before I die. And I'm committed to that. And it's not about me. It's about being a vessel for that energy to flow through me.
I like that for you.
You'll be playing the bongos on the sidelines, like, go, babe,
I like
get
that
it.
for you.
No, but what does it look like to just be outrageous in the belief that yes, we can do that.
We must.
And we must. And why should only the extractive sort of, corporations and businesses like have such crazy profit margins? Like it's not right. And I feel like life is asking us to befriend money and see it as an ally and welcome it as an ally and unlock it. It's like you know, when a limb falls asleep, like if you sleep on your hand weird and you wake up and it's like all numb and then pins and needles, well, that's your body communicating to you that there's a lack of circulation. And I feel like collectively, like our limbs are asleep. Like there's the energy is not moving the way that it needs to move. And the only way it's going to move is if those of us who actually care, deeply care, are willing to get out of our own way and welcome money into our lives. So this is a call to action for me and also for those who are listening. Like, you know, what is that number for you that you're willing to like put forward and steward into a more beautiful world?
Well, if I could interrupt you for a second, you know, we talk about this, you know, often these evil companies with these huge profit margins and greedy capitalists. And I guess when I reflect back on myself and my journey, I was one of those people that I was just fighting for my big piece of the pie. And in hindsight, when I look back on it, I realized that it was all what I talked about earlier of not feeling safe in the world. And my way of feeling safe in the world was to have more and more material wealth, to get more and more external validation. And it was a fallacy, and I didn't know it at the time. And so I guess I wonder if we should make those big corporations wrong, or we should acknowledge that the people that are at the head of those large corporations, those evil capitalists, actually have a scared little boy inside like I did that couldn't read or had some kind of insecurity that's causing them not to feel safe in the world. And at the core, you said, you know, we have a crisis of meaning, and we also have a crisis of belonging. And people just want to feel safe. And we don't realize, you know, I wasn't conscious of the ways in which I didn't feel safe in the world. And so let's just also be careful to not make, you know, the evil capitalists wrong, because they're just trying to feel safe like everyone else is.
Yeah. And behind every corporation is also just humans, you know, and it's easy to label and judge and make wrong. And I acknowledge that. And also there's in the same way that, you know, if the child picks up the chainsaw and you are like, hey, I'm just going to very carefully remove that as fast as possible from your hands, because you actually don't have the capacity to wield that level of power yet without potential fatal destruction. It feels to
There's
me,
many CEOs that should have the chainsaw taken away.
it feels that way to me. Like, you know, okay, you know, you're wielding a tremendous amount of power. You're driven by what I would call unconscious patterning and, you know, unprocessed trauma likely. And, you know, look at the damage, like look at the amount of species that are going extinct, the speed of the environmental destruction, like the extractive nature of the way that we as human beings have operated does need to stop. And without making, how do we declare that we are a no to that way of operating in the same way a parent firmly creates a boundary for their child, while also keeping our heart open, right? And that's, I think, ultimately the challenge.
Yeah.
But you bring forward a beautiful point, and I resonate. And yeah, compassion is, you know, an ongoing journey.
Beautiful. So where do we go from here?
Well, we've shared a few times throughout this conversation that there's an invitation for those who are listening, who are inspired by this vision of KAVANÂ specifically, to get involved. And so we want to kind of send the bat signal out into the world for the aligned allies that may have some capital that they are wanting to, you know, contribute to something that's meaningful, something that's meant to have significant ripples in the world and unite amazing people that, yeah, have these blueprints, you know?
Yeah, like you said, we have enough money to do, you know, phase 1A.
Well, once our house sells.
Once our house sells. And yeah, and we're looking to raise money to build the temple.
Yeah, so the temple, which is kind of the heart of the KAVANÂ project, is one of the largest, you know, line items on the budget. And it represents, I think, a lot of what KAVANÂ stands for, which is really like reconnecting to the sacred, reconnecting to, you know, I kind of like the reframe on the subtle art of not giving a fuck, but the subtle art of seeing the sacred. Like there is a way of operating where everything in life becomes a ceremony. And so this temple is an invitation for us to step back into looking at life through the eyes of awe and wonder, and really feeling connected to something greater than ourselves, whatever that is. It's a non-denominational temple, right? This is not a religious place. This is a place where we get to be in communion with spirit, with the invisible realms, and with the ancient intelligence. And temples are an ancient intelligence in and of themselves. They are technologies that allow us to bridge and connect. So the invitation is for those who would like to participate in building the temple financially to contact us, and we'd love to share more details on what that might look like. So if that is you, if you're listening to this and you're like, yes, I would like to be a temple patron, steward, and sit in the first, activation of that temple once it's built, fly to Mexico and sit in the space and be like, yeah, I helped make this happen. If that's you, then I invite you to just visit our website, which is kavanaretreats.com/connect. And from there, you will have more information on how to engage with us.
It's amazing.
So thank you for your vulnerability. Sir Benjamin Becker, I adore you. And I want to also just take a moment and celebrate our love.
Yeah, we really have something beautiful, and it's been fun to share it with the world. And yeah, this podcast, even we decided yesterday we were going to do this and pulled this together to just kind of share with the world where we're at.
Yeah. Thank you for continuing to wear your heart on your sleeve, do the hard work, and then share it.
Yeah.
Because there's medicine in that.
Well, thank you for standing for my greatness, and I always stand for yours.